Rian Johnson wrote and directed the comedy mystery Knives Out, and I'm tempted just to make this into a writing symposium on how to construct a mystery, because I'm always fascinated by just the craft of constructing a storyline like this. Mysteries feel to me sort of as much like architecture as they do like writing. So first off, have you always been a fan of mysteries, and what first kind of sparked your interest in the genre?
Yeah, I grew up reading Agatha Christie's books. That was kind of what hooked me initially with this. And so I've always wanted to do a whodunit. And I had the basic idea for this about 10 years ago. The basic idea just kind of being, could you do a movie that starts as a whodunit, turns into a Hitchcock thriller, and then turns back into a whodunit at the end? And genre-wise, that seemed like an interesting exercise, and maybe a way to get all the things I love about whodunits into a movie, but give it a slightly more robust engine than just clue gathering and a big surprise at the end of who did the crime.
And with a storyline this complex with a lot of twists and turns, like what's the starting point of sort of devising the story? Do you sort of think backwards from the ending you're looking for, or do you sort of find it along the way?
Well, I write really structurally. And actually, I'm at my desk. Let me see if I can. I write in these little moleskin notebooks, and I'll write like what I'm working on. So this is Knives, etc. here, and these are actually the Knives Out ones. So there's 4 of them. It took 4 of these notebooks to kind of write Knives Out. And so I will, I'll basically spend the first 80% of the process outlining. So let me see if I can find the example of my outline here. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. Let's see. But I'll draw a line across the paper, and I'll have to be able to kind of, here's an example of it. So this is kind of what it looks like when I outline, and I'll do this through the whole process. And essentially, this is the first act, this is the second act, this is the third act. And what I'm doing here is kind of going sequence by sequence and thinking even not so much about mechanics of the plot, but more about the story, more about what is drawing the audience through sequence by sequence with the story, and what the stakes are, and where we're going with it, and then what the turn is at the end of each one of those sequences that kind of catapults us into the next set of stakes. And it's only when I have that whole thing laid out on that size thing, so I can see it all in one visual gulp, that I can jump into actually doing the work of writing. It's not even starting from the end and working backwards. I start like zoomed out like a satellite picture, and I work like that. And then the typing is the last 10% of the process. The typing out the script is not the easy part, but it's the smaller part of the process compared to the planning for me.
And when you do go from the outlining to the writing of the script, and things are getting fleshed out, and with characters and the full story, do you find yourself do things change in your mind, or are you always very very married to that outline? Do you have that decided firmly?
No, you always have to be open to change, and that's something that I keep learning and relearning, is that you can't get precious about anything, and you have to be able to think in terms of even throwing away big things that you've done. If it's not working, it's not working. When I wrote the script for Looper, a movie I made before Star Wars, I wrote an entire draft and then realized the entire second half was not working. And so I tossed it and started kind of from the drawing board and redrew the entire second act and I had the script like in my hand. I had like and anyone who's a writer knows once you print that script out and you have it, it's really tough to go back in under the hood. But no, you can't be precious or attached to anything. If something's not working, you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to dive in and just make it work.
And in terms of like plot mechanics, I feel like time travel, like you dealt with in Looper, is the only other thing that's sort of as complex in terms of plot architecture as, say, mystery. Which would you say was sort of an easier write or an easier construction, or one that you preferred over the other, if either?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're very different, oddly, but they do have a similarity. I mean, I think, you know, time travel is you actually have, it's slightly easier, I think, with time travel, because time travel is a fantasy element, not a science element, I guess. Time travel is not really science fiction. Time travel is really the equivalent of like the spells in Harry Potter. And time travel, it absolutely needs to work and line up and make sense, but only within the context of the narrative you're constructing and the rules that you construct for that narrative. So you're essentially creating your own game board and then saying, okay, here are the rules of my version of time travel, and everything has to be consistent within this limited scope. Whereas with a whodunit, it is a little more draconian in terms of everything has to actually make sense, and everything has to line up, and it has to every detail does have to fall into place. So they're different challenges. They're very different challenges, but I would say in a way you have to almost be more fastidious with the murder mystery genre, because also because it's a genre that more people are going to rewatch the movie and go back and make sure you've, you know, dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's.
And you know, once you get to filming it, this story, so much of it takes place in this mansion, you know, that Harlan lives in, and it's such a visually distinctive and you know, just this evocative setting. What was it like sort of designing that with production designer David Crank and getting that look right? And of course, the display of the knives, which is such a centerpiece.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was a blast, because you know, for me, the hard part is in the writing, and then I get to collaborate with all these amazing artists to kind of visualize it. And you mentioned David Crank, our production designer, who was incredible. Also, David Schlesinger, who was our set decorator, who was the one who found all the amazing detail in the house and brought it all together. Yeah, I gave them a reference of, there's a movie from the 70s called Sleuth with Michael Caine and Laurence Olivier that I'm a huge fan of. And it's a movie that also takes place largely inside a mansion that is owned by an eccentric mystery writer, and it's filled with his obsessions. It's like the inside of his brain. And so I gave them that reference, and we talked about the character of Harlan, and they really they went off to the races. I kind of got to show up on set and just soak in this amazing environment that David had created, and their whole team.
Another thing that I found really visually effective is the costumes. You know, when you have so many characters, you know, that you're juggling and making them distinct and really vivid. I think that does a lot of the little visual work, that costume design by Jenny Egan. What was that like to work on that? Yeah,
Jenny was amazing, and she had a really hard task. She had to, you know, because she had to make every single character in it as distinct and unique as the characters on a clue board, but with making them feel modern and not like they're wearing wacky costumes. They had to feel real world and yet each completely defined. And I think Jenny just did an extraordinary job with that. And just also with the costumes, captured the sense of fun. You know, there's without going over it. Hopefully it's kind of what the whole movie does, which is have a lot of fun with it, go just to the edge of going over the top, but don't push it over the top. It still feels like it's, you know, grounded enough so that it still feels like these are real characters.
And that cast is so sort of big and sprawling and you know, full of so many like recognizable names like Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, Christopher Plummer, and on and on. What was it like? Did you write the script with a lot of actors already in mind, or was that something that came later?
Yeah, no, I've learned to not do that. I've learned to not write with actors in mind, because I find then you always get your heart broken because they're not available when it comes time to shoot. So no, I tend to write with a very blank slate, and then I sit down with my producer, Ram Bergman, and my casting director, Mary Vernew, and we talk about, you know, who's available and who would be right for it. And you know, Daniel Craig was the first one who came on board for this, and he's kind of the reason the movie got made. And once also, once Daniel came on board, we had to get the movie together very quickly because he had a very brief window before he went back into doing James Bond. And so once he said yes, we basically had 6 weeks to get the movie together before we had to start shooting. And that included finding the entire rest of the cast. Which actually I think that maybe helped us because, as opposed to saying to them, oh, yeah, we're shooting sometime next year. What do you think? We could say, no, are you available right now to come to Boston? And I think that actually was a helpful thing.
And having Daniel Craig in that lead role, you have this very well known British actor, James Bond, as you mentioned, and he's playing this very southern drawling kind of detective. It seems very against type for him. What were your thoughts about just the idea of him playing Benoit Blanc?
I think Daniel can do anything. I was just like, I don't know, I wasn't even thinking about type or against type. I just knew he was an incredible actor. And I'd seen him, he's amazing as Bond. And I think he's so good as Bond that lots of people maybe kind of imagine that that's kind of what he's like, kind of stern and, and he's not at all. He's really, really funny and he's got a great sense of humor and he's a warm guy. And, having met him a few times over the years, I just knew that he would destroy this part. And, and also I could tell that he was going to have fun doing it. That was the other big thing is I could, from meeting with him, I could tell that he was just like chomping at the bit to dive into this and to give like this big fun performance. I think you can tell how much fun he's having on the screen. I think that really translates for the audience.
And amidst this story, this mystery kind of that's unfolding, it's layered with this sort of this social themes about this very wealthy family, most of them seemingly liberal, and how that's sort of tested when their father's nurse. They come into conflict with her to a certain degree. What were your thoughts bringing that theme to, weaving that into the story in addition to just the pure mystery of it?
Yeah, one of the things that seemed really exciting to me was plugging this into America in 2019. And, it's something that the whodunit genre is uniquely suited to. Because really what the whodunit genre does, it creates a little microcosm world of society, whether it's in a house or a train or in a vacation resort or whatever. It's a contained little microcosm of society. And you have a power structure within that microcosm. And the person at the top, is going to get bumped off. And then you have all the suspects underneath that person. And a cross section of that, all your suspects, is kind of the high to the low of the society. And so it's something that within the context of a completely entertaining, fun, enjoyable genre is also very good at effortlessly and without feeling like spoon feeding or sermonizing, effortlessly giving you a portrait of this little society, which can reflect the bigger society. It's something Agatha Christie always did. She was never like a heavy-handed political writer, but she was always examining contemporary British society through the lens of all these different characters. And it's something I think we've lost in whodunits because they generally are period pieces and they're generally set in Britain because they're usually Agatha Christie adaptations. And I love Agatha Christie adaptations. I'm a whodunit junkie. I watch all of them. But it seemed to me like it could be really interesting to kind of recapture that element of it and to plug it in a very current way into the stuff that we're talking about now into America in 2019.
As a writer and director over the course of your career, you have worked on films at such and TV on such wildly different scales, from like independent films, all the way up to Star Wars, the Last Jedi, and that gigantic production. Is it a drastically different creative experience on one end versus the other, or does it all kind of scale up to your approach as a writer and as a director?
Yeah, it's not a different experience at all. It's the most striking thing is how similar the experiences have been, whether I'm doing something very small or something very big. The thing, even especially with a big movie, I was going to say even with a big movie, but probably especially with a big movie, the fundamental things that make the movie work or not work are the exact same fundamental things that make a small movie work or not work. It's whether the scene with characters are engaging the audience, whether the story is engaging the audience, whether the audience is invested emotionally, whether they're interested in what happens next. And all that stuff is really accomplished with, you know, a camera and a couple of actors and making sure your scenes are really clicking. And that, you know, it doesn't matter if the set around you is a massive spaceship or a small library in New England. Really, the work you're doing is with the camera and a few actors and trying to, you know, really make this connection work with the audience. So no, I find, you know, it's all storytelling. It's all just, whether you scale up or down, it's all basically the same thing.
And as we're recording this, we're, of course, amidst awards season, and Knives Out was selected by the American Film Institute as one of the top 10 films of the year. What were your thoughts on that recognition and just the whole, you know, long kind of award season process we're entering?
Yeah, it makes me super, super happy. That was really nice. That was incredibly nice of them. And I was also really excited that we got Best Ensemble from, was it National Board of Review, to give us Best Ensemble, because recognizing the actors, that makes me really, really happy. And you know, the most gratifying thing for me has been, I've been over the past couple of months since we premiered at Toronto, I've been traveling around to different film festivals and different screenings and just watching the movie with different audiences. And I mean, really, the reason we made this movie was to create a good time in the theater, to create something where you could just go in and have a blast with a big audience and feel like just, I don't know, just have fun, you know, and have fun with a fun genre that, you know, we don't see a ton anymore. And put big movie stars on the screen and have them just be, you know, having the time of their lives up there. And hopefully that translates to the audience having the time of their life. So for me, traveling around and seeing audiences really enjoy the movie, that to me has been, that's been the most gratifying thing. That's what it's all about.
And, you know, speaking of awards, we at Gold Derby have our own awards for, like, film and TV, and I just wanted to mention that your episode of Breaking Bad that you directed, Ozymandias, won our Best TV Drama Episode of the Decade award a couple of months ago. So, and that episode caught on so hard and so fast that it feels like one of, like, the cornerstone episodes of that show. What was it like, what was the reaction like at the time, and what is it like looking back at that episode now?
Well, I still can't believe they let me do that episode. I felt like, and you know, it was written by Moira Wally Beckett, and obviously Vince Gilligan, was the creator of the show, and it's his, you know, it's his story and his characters, and I really just got to show up and try and execute as well as I could this brilliant script that Moira had written, and this story that Vince had. And I'm a Breaking Bad fan, and so when I read the script when they sent it to me, I think, you know, I was like, wow, really? I get to do this one. So I don't know. I guess I feel comfortable saying, like, I'm right there with you guys. Like, Breaking Bad was one of my favorite shows, and I'm, you know, I guess I have a little more of I can't get the distance from the episode itself to be able to sit and say, oh my God, but I remember reading the script and just feeling like, oh my God, what these people are doing are just on another level. I just hope I can do it justice in translating it to the screen.
Well, congratulations, Ryan, on Knives Out, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. And I just want to say to everyone watching, make sure to visit goldderby.com for more interviews just like these, and to make predictions for Oscars, Golden Globes, Grammys, and very much more. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thanks so much for having me.